Today we'll look at the top tier yet often overlooked placement strategy for the board game Settlers of Catan. Even though not as many people play it, it had the highest win rate in my most recent 6,000 game data study. I'm Hank, a Catan champion and a board game strategy coach, and I promise you this is a great strategy, which I love playing as well. So without further ado, let me tell you everything I know about the City Plus Road setup. The City Plus Road setup builds on ore, wheat, wood and brick to be able to buy cheap cities and roads. But you don't need a lot of sheep. Common sentiment is that a typical 10-point plan for the City Plus Road setup is 4 cities and the longest road. But that's not totally true. That's because the City Plus Road setup is actually one of the most diverse strategies in the game, and I'm going to show you. So let's take a look at game number 1. This board is great for a City Plus Road setup, because it's highly likely one of the players will place on the 5-9-10 with the triple sheep, giving the City Plus Road player a fantastic trading partner, as it doesn't produce any sheep. I get to place the first settlement in the game and I select the 6-9-10. It's one of the 3 spots with the highest production odds on the board. It has both ore and wheat, which are the best resources in Catan, and it's also near the coast, which gives me easy expansion opportunities later in the game. The upside of these ore-wheat spots is that you combine them with wood and brick for the City Plus Road setup, or you can combine them with sheep to play an ore-wheat-sheep strategy. That's for another video. I decide to point my road left, because with the 5-9-10 triple sheep spot open, it could be that an opponent decides to go for a heavy sheep port strategy, by building on the 9-12 with the sheep port directly. And I don't produce any sheep, so it doesn't make sense for me to go to the sheep port. And the 3-for-1 port is a great option for me as well. Red places on the 5-9-10 full sheep. This is not a good selection, because an all sheep spot is very weak. You'd rather have a spot with more ore and wheat, like the 6-4-3 and 8-5-3 at the top of the board. Blue selects the 8-4-3 at the bottom, which can be combined with the 6-5-11 or the 6-4-3 to form a City Plus Road setup for blue as well. However, black has different plans, because black builds on the 8-10 and the 5-4-3. It's a decent setup that plays well for the largest army. However, by selecting a coastal spot so early in the cycle, you leave open extra free hex spots for your opponents, which isn't good for black. On top of the expectation that red will select the 9-12 sheep port, it means I'm going to have a very powerful setup. Blue selects the 6-5-11, which means blue is going to play a City Plus Road setup as well. This is a strong pick. However, blue does have a problem, because the 4 ore is blue's only ore spot, and there's not that much ore on the board to begin with. Therefore, blue might struggle to build cities if the 4 doesn't roll a lot. Red blunders again by selecting the 6-12 instead of the 9-12. It will be expensive for red to even get to the sheep board. I would have selected the 8-5-10 in red's position, because then you have a spot that produces a lot of cards at the very least. I select the 8-5-10 myself. I think that after building on the 8-3, I'm unstoppable with 2 ore and 2 wheat spots. On top of that, red will trade me all the sheep I need. I can also connect my settlements easily, because I'm playing the positional concept known as side by side. It means that 2 of my settlements share the same hex, which in this case is the 10 wheat. Therefore, side by side makes it easy to take the longest road. But it gets even better, because all of my hexes are either single shared or triple shared. Most robber blocks happen on double shared hexes, like the 8 wood at the bottom right. Like I predicted, the first thing I do in this game is trade wood for sheep with red, and I end my turn. An orbit later, I buy a development card. I initially saved for a city, but I realized with such easy access to sheep trades, I can play for the largest army as well, with black as my only competitor. As you may recall, this is not the typical game plan for the City Plus Road player. But I realized that in this game it's actually cheaper to play for the largest army against black as my only competitor than to play for the longest road. A few turns later, because I bought a development card and I was stolen from a few times, I've fallen behind against the others, all being on 3 points already. But I do have a lot of cards. So I roll a 5, I 4-for-1 trade the wheat for an ore, and I build a city on the ore-wheat spot, because ore and wheat are the best resources. A few turns later, I buy another development card, because I don't think anyone overtakes me for the largest army, and I want to protect my best spots. It turns out to be a knight. However, the purchase led to a repeating problem. The others keep increasing their production before I do, with all of them having 4 points already. However, my bug actually becomes a feature, because I have less points of production, I get stolen from less too. This is called staying under the radar, and this pacing of your victory points is a key skill that top tier Catan players master. I also 4-for-1 trade wood for a sheep with the bank. 1 orbit later, I turn the sheep into a settlement on the 8-3. It's key when playing under the radar to keep up with your opponent's points of production, because otherwise they get too large of a lead. Felt like the situation was getting out of hand at this point, with black building a couple of cities in a row and getting to 7 points against my measly 4. but taking the lead early isn't always the best tactic in Catan. And as you can see, I still have a lot of cards. So when I roll a couple of good rolls and even a 10 on my own turn, I'm completely back in the game. Now I just have 1 point less than black, but also have 2 knights activated, and once I activate a 3rd knight, I get 2 more victory points from the largest army bonus. But I have another advantage, which is a psychological one. The thing is, people deal with change very poorly. And because many players have made up their mind that black is in the best position, when it comes to robber and trade decisions, people might undervalue my position. Because I was not a threat just a few turns ago. Black built another city. Typically, it's better to only start the battle for the longest road once you have the largest army locked. However, now with black having 8 victory points and needing only 2 more to win, I decided now is the time to take the longest road earlier than planned. In fact, black actually gets to a situation with only 1 road from winning the game. But I keep the longest road, which means I win the first game because I bought my 3rd knight in the previous orbit. However, this is not the only way to win. In fact, let me show you the second game because it's an incredible example of how to play the City Plus road. On this board, red starts with the 6-9-10, which is one of the spots with the best dice odds on the board. I select the 6-4-3. Even though it has worse dice odds, the board only has 1 strong ore spot, which makes it so that my opponents will have to get the ore somehow. It makes trading with me a fairly unavoidable option. I point my road upwards to the 3-for-1 board. I also considered pointing left to the ore board, which would have been a good option too. However, if someone places on the 8-3, it blocks out the ore board, so I think the 3-for-1 board is better. Generally speaking, I'd say that 2-for-1 boards work fantastic with the City Plus road setup. The ore board is a good example. However, the wheat, wood and brick boards are even better. Next up is blue, who selects the 6-5-11. This is a great selection, as blue can combine it with multiple great spots on this board. Orange makes a pretty cool setup with the 8-5-10 and the 9-10-3 with only brick, wood and sheep. This is a fantastic setup for the longest road, but it lacks power because it doesn't have any ore and wheat. If orange gets to the brickboard, however, it can build cities that way. But it's a risk, because the 8-10 is a good spot for other players as well. Blue selects the 8-4-3, playing a 5 resource setup. It's good, but it's most likely weaker than it looks. Now, I can choose between multiple great spots, of which the 5-9-2 and the 8-3 stand out to me. The 8-3 would give me a strong ore v cheap setup, but I'd have to leave the powerful 5-9-2 to red. So I went with the 5-9-2, which is equally strong for me. I do have a strong competitor for the longest road, but I expect orange to have a weak start, giving me a late game opportunity to take the longest road. And as you remember from last game, City Plus road doesn't always need the longest road to win the game. There's multiple ways. I point my road to the open 9-4-11. This is very risky because it's the best producing spot left on the board, but if I get it, it's huge. However, it's not a good spot for red, as it gives no wood and not enough ore to justify the selection. A bigger risk was red actually taking the 6-2 with great ore, but fortunately red selected the 8-10. I think this is a mistake from red, because there's already 3 players with strong wood brick and 0 players well adapted to take the largest army. Now the game begins, and at my first turn I built a road and I decide not to buy a development card. I think I can get a quick city with this much ore wheat production, or I could use the wheat sheep for the settlement on a 9-4-11. I settle on a 9-4-11 on the next turn after a trade with orange. This great start allows me to start focusing on my next goals, which are a city on the 6-4-3, a settlement on the 6-2 and my 10-point plan for how to win the game. However, my opponents caught up and red even built a city before I do. But it's okay, because a few turns later I have this amazing hand. I'm curious what you would do here. I think there's 2 good options. Double development card after a 4-for-1 bank trade, or settle plus development card. So please let me know in the comments what move you would make and why. Pause the video if you need to. I decided to settle on the 3-for-1 board and to buy a development card. Generally, I think building 4 or 5 settlements before building a city with a setup like, for example, blue has, is a bad idea. Because you get stuck in your options too fast and you will get a lot of robbers because you look quite strong. However, the City Plus road setup is efficient with building cities. So it's quite likely you can build a city fast, and because I have 2 ore and 2 wheat spots, it's tough for my opponents to stop my card production for a city. Even though the 2 doesn't roll a lot. The development card I bought last turn turned out to be a road building, which allows me to build 2 roads for free. Next, I make a trade where I give up ore, wheat and brick for wood and sheep. Normally, this would be a much better deal for blue. However, I don't think blue still has a shot at winning the game considering their slow start. I played a road building and I settled on the 8th free, while taking the longest road in the process. Again, another question for you. What would you do this turn? Would you buy 1 development card, 2 development cards, or would you make a trade with the bank to build a city? Please pause the video and think about it. I will give my answer in a few seconds. I decided to build a city to escape the 5 settlement situation. Without buying development cards here, I have no shot at the largest army, so I have to go for the longest road. However, I think I have the best odds to win the longest road, despite fierce competition from red and orange. The reason I think I'd win the longest road long term is because I have the most space around me and the possibility to connect my roads, unlike red and orange. This makes it easier for me to go to 11 or 12 roads. On top of that, if I hold the longest road, it's much more expensive for them to get to 10 points, because the longest road is crucial for their game plan. So here, orange took the longest road, but I get to build another city. Red is actually the biggest problem, with 6 and most likely 7 points with that unplayed development card. Therefore, it's good for me that orange builds many roads to prevent red from winning on the short term. I have the best dice odds long term, so I don't even mind that orange cuts between my 2 roads on the 2 wheat. I attempt to connect my roads this way, because if orange cuts me off like this, I can still build between the 4 free and loop around the 6 ore. Here I make an odd play, which I actually believe to be the right one. Instead of building a city, I trade my ores and my sheeps with the bank for 2 bricks. I build 2 roads to connect my settlements and I take the longest road. It makes it impossible for orange to take the longest road back, because they simply don't have enough space, and too expensive for red to take it from me right away. This gives me all the time I need to get my 10th victory point, which I accomplish on the next turn by building my 3rd city. So city plus road is pretty strong, and I recommend you to look for it more often. If you want to learn more about Catan, I recommend you watch this video next, or you could book a board game coaching session with me on my website, of which the link is in the description. I help people improve at board games like Catan, Wingspan and so much more. Regardless, thank you for watching and have an amazing day.